Part 1. Mosque in the city of Chandrapur in British colonial India, probably in the early 1920s. The novel does not specify a group of educated, professional Muslim Indians, including Dr. Aziz and the lawyers Hamidullah and Mahmud Ali, have dinner and discuss whether it is possible for the English and Indians to be friends. Aziz is then summoned to report to his superior, Major Calendar. Annoyed by the interruption, he goes, but it takes him some time to get there. When he does, the Major is out, and two English women, Mrs. Leslie and Mrs. Calendar, snub him and take his tonga, a two-wheeled horse-drawn vehicle. He then walks down to a mosque, where he finds comfort in the familiar architecture. He notices another British woman and yells at her for not removing her shoes. But she has already done so because she is respectful of the place. Her name is Mrs. Moore, and her son is Ronnie Heaslop, the city magistrate, who had offended Mahmud Ali. When Aziz realizes she doesn't like Mrs. Calendar, he feels a connection to her and tells her she is an Oriental, meaning she has empathy and perceptive powers unlike any English person. Mrs. Moore returns to the English club to join Adela Quest, the young woman she accompanied to India. Adela has come to India to decide whether to marry Ronnie. At the club, Adela declares, "I want to see the real India," because she feels she has been spending too much time among the English. Mr. Turton, who governs Chandrapur, suggests a bridge party between East and West. Ronnie explains to Adela why one cannot really socialize with Indians, and uses the case of Mahmud Ali, who bragged about having a cigarette with Ronnie. When Ronnie learns his mother has been challenged by an Indian doctor in a mosque, he wants to report the incident, but his mother insists he shouldn't. When Muslim and Hindu Indians gather to discuss whether to attend the unprecedented bridge party, the prominent Nawab Bahadur, a British loyalist, says he will attend, which encourages the others. At the bridge party, the British stand across the tennis courts from the Indians, as Ronnie and Mrs. Turton talk disparagingly about them. Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Turton go about the work of socializing, Mrs. Turton accompanying Mrs. Moore and Adela to meet ladies, a group of ladies in Purta. After some difficulty in communication, Mrs. Moore appeals to one of the ladies, who invites her and Adela to visit any time, ultimately settling on Thursday morning. Meanwhile, Mr. Turton, who seems to know something bad about every Indian attending, makes his rounds. Cyril Fielding, the schoolmaster at Government College, socializes with the Indians extensively and is pleased to hear the positive impression the newly arrived English ladies have made upon the Indians. He seeks out Adela to invite her and Mrs. Moore to tea on Thursday afternoon to meet other Indians. At a poorly cooked English dinner, Adela begins to dread her future life in India and vows to find like-minded people with whom to associate. At the dinner is Miss Derrick, who seems to have little respect for the Maharaja and Maharani she works for in a native state. Back at the bungalow, Mrs. Moore criticizes Ronnie for the way the British treat the Indians and tells him God put people here to be pleasant to one another. Although he had said he would go to the bridge party with Dr. Pannalai, who needs help managing his horse, Aziz doesn't attend, not wanting to be exposed to the two English ladies who snubbed him on this of all days, the anniversary of his wife's death. Instead, he looks at a photo of his wife and becomes sad, going off to the Maidan to practice polo. There he begins to play with an English army officer, and the two come to like each other for the moment. While other Muslims begin praying toward Mecca, he taps a sacred bull with his polo mallet, just in time for Dr. Pannalai to see him do so. Pannalai is irritated because Aziz never showed up, so he drove over some flowers at the English club. Aziz is angry and intentionally makes Pannalai's horse bolt. Then he returns home to find an invitation to tea from Fielding, whom he has always wanted to get to know. Fielding, who was 40 when he came to India, doesn't often socialize with other English people. Aziz arrives at Fielding's while the schoolmaster is dressing, and when Fielding ruins his last collar stud, Aziz gives him one from his own collar. They quickly get along well. When the ladies arrive, Adela asks Aziz if he could imagine why the Indian people who were supposed to pick them up this morning never showed. Aziz says it's because they're Hindus and invites them to his own bungalow. But when he reflects how dirty it is, he changes the subject and begins discussing the architecture of the old Mughal house in which Fielding lives, imagining himself a Mughal emperor dispensing charity. He urges Adela to stay in India until the mangoes ripen, but she says she must return home before then. Then Fielding takes Mrs. Moore on a tour of the college, while Adela remains with Aziz and Professor Narayan Godbole, a Brahmin, member of the highest Hindu caste, or class. Aziz then invites the ladies on an expedition to the Mirabar caves instead of to his bungalow. Just then Rani comes in to take the ladies to polo, and he is annoyed to see Adela alone with the Indian men. Fielding and Mrs. Moore return, and everyone is in a bad mood. Professor Godbole sings a haunting, enigmatic song, during which Rani leaves. On the way to see the polo, Adela is annoyed at Rani but also ashamed at the way she announced she would not stay and marry Rani by inadvertently announcing she could not wait for mangoes. She tells him they won't be married, though hurt, he takes the news reasonably. They are then invited for a drive in the car of the Nawab Bahadur, of whom Rani approves. When the Nawab falls asleep, Rani directs the driver to take a different road, and a sudden jolt causes his and Adela's hands to touch, creating an animal thrill between them. Just then something hits the car, causing it to hit a tree. While the Nawab gets hysterical, the young people calmly but unsuccessfully search for the cause. Just then Miss Derrick comes driving along in her employer's car and drives them back to town, and upon their return Adela changes her mind again and says they will be married. When Mrs. Moore hears about the accident, she exclaims, "A ghost." Meanwhile, down in Chandrapur, the Nawab Bahadur recalls being haunted by the ghost of a man he had killed with his car 9 years ago. A few days later Aziz is in bed, slightly ill, and thinking of going to a brothel in Calcutta, when 4 Muslim Indian friends visit him. They discuss rumors that Godbole was sickened at Fielding's, there is disparaging talk of Hindus, and then Aziz recites Persian poetry. Punnalai enters to see if Aziz is faking illness. Fielding arrives and a genial discussion begins. Fielding reveals he is an atheist, to the shock of all present. He also offers no excuse for the British to hold India. Everyone except Fielding leaves. Aziz has ordered his servant not to bring Fielding's horse. Aziz calls Fielding back and shows Fielding his most prized possession, a photo of his wife. Fielding is touched and demonstrates he understands the purpose of purdah as well as the significance of Aziz's action. Aziz appreciates Fielding's kindness, and they begin to discuss women, marriage, and children. Aziz warns Fielding not to speak his mind so openly. Fielding says he travels light, without attachments, but Aziz is rooted in the community by religion and his 3 children.